I think a lot of people don't realize what an asset or what a strength it is to be a good self-managing landlord. And it's something that a lot of people are attracted to because when you're looking for partners, at least in my case, a lot of times I'm partnering with people that have the money, but don't necessarily have the time or the wherewithal or the bandwidth or whatever the case may be to actually be the boots on the ground. So by me bringing my strength of self-management to the partnership, that's a huge benefit, and I think we undersell ourselves a lot of times as self-managing landlords.
Welcome to the Landlord Diaries, where we talk about midterm rentals and the opportunities behind them. We'll share landlord stories, talk about maximizing investment potential, and discuss how to live the very best landlord life. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Furnished Finder, the leader and largest online marketplace for midterm rentals. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy our content.
Welcome back, Amelia McGee, real estate entrepreneur with over 40 rentals, author, coach, and co-founder of Wire, womeninvestinrealestate.com. The Wire ladies, Amelia and Grace, were featured on one of our top 10 episodes, which is titled 3 Steps to Launch an MTR, Start Housing Travel Nurses, and Double Your Rental Income. And that's episode 62 if you haven't caught it. Today, we will discuss their BiggerPockets book, The Self-Managing Landlord. And in this book, Amelia and Grace say there are 2 traditional approaches to property management. The first one is the DIY reactive landlord that is fueled by the idea of passive real estate and wants to put as little time and effort into their properties as possible. The second avatar is the property manager approach that normally results in considerably less profit and less attention to what your property needs. The Wire ladies have added a third management option that can be summed up in this quote from their book. The self-managing landlord is armed with systems and processes that maximize cash flow, minimize stress and time, and provide a better quality home for your tenant. Woo! I'm sure everybody's excited right now. How are you today, Amelia?
I'm super excited to be back. Thank you so much for having me again.
Yes, yes. We always love having the Wire ladies on and with new, fresh content every time. So let's start off with a reminder. Maybe take a minute or two of remind everyone how you got started in your real estate journey and how you are successfully managing your portfolio today.
Yeah, so I started in real estate back in 2019. I purchased a flip property after watching all of the HGTV shows and thought, how hard is it, guys do it, right? And so I decided to do that. And when I was done with that flip, I realized that that was a whole lot of work that I wasn't really into. I was still working a full time job at that time. So I was flipping on nights and weekends, and the flip was an hour away from me. So there was also commuting time in there. And at some point during that journey, I stumbled across BiggerPockets and learned about passive income through owning rental properties. So that's when I decided I'm not going to do this flip thing anymore. I'm going to take the money that I made from that flip and buy multifamily properties with it. So I purchased a triplex in small town Iowa in my hometown for $78,000. Yes,
Nice.
you can really buy properties for that cheap here in small town Iowa. I think it initially cash flowed around $700 or $800 a month. So I was ecstatic with that. And once that monthly income started coming in, I was totally addicted to owning rental properties and just continued to scale from there. So since then, I have scaled to 45 doors, which are a mixture of long term, midterm, and short term. And that's where I'm at today.
All right, let's talk about some of your growing pains and challenges and just some highlight success stories along the way, because that's quite the journey to go from 0 to 45.
Yes. So I think the biggest hurdle that I faced so far, and I think most investors run into this, is what do I do once I run out of my own money? Definitely that hit me very quickly. I purchased a triplex and then I purchased a quadplex. So I had 7 doors within 3 or 4 months, and I was completely out of my own money at that point. So then I turned back to my parents or friends and family, in your case, maybe. And they were like, oh, I see you're doing this rental thing. Like, we're getting ready to retire and we want some extra income. Maybe we should get in on this. So we started purchasing properties together 50-50, and I think we purchased 15 doors within the next year. So I quickly grew my portfolio from there. And then I also partnered with a couple that I met through Instagram who were private money lenders on an 11 unit apartment building that I own. So definitely had to learn how to raise funds very quickly, which I never in a million years would have expected was part of the job within real estate investing. But that's definitely one hurdle that I can think of right off the top of my head that you'll probably encounter too at some point.
And I think you started as a self-managing landlord. I don't think you ever brought a property manager on or anything like that. So, when you're presenting this as a new investor, saying, "Hey, you want to partner with me on this?" What are some quick tips that people could use in securing those partnership deals, just getting started as a self-managing landlord?
That's a good question. And honestly, I never even realized when I was first starting out that hiring a property management company was an option. Like, I was so green in real estate investing that I just thought, oh, you own properties and then you're a landlord. I didn't realize that other people could manage it for you. And I'm actually really thankful for that because I love self managing. So, and I think a lot of people don't realize what an asset or what a strength it is to be a good self managing landlord. And it's something that a lot of people are attracted to because when you're looking for partners, at least in my case, a lot of times I'm partnering with people that have the money, but don't necessarily have the time or the wherewithal or the bandwidth or whatever the case may be to actually be the boots on the ground. So by me bringing my strength of self-management to the partnership, that's a huge benefit, and I think we undersell ourselves a lot of times as self-managing landlords. And really it's a huge benefit to be a self-managing landlord.
Yeah, I think especially for a lot of our audience, a lot of our audience on Furnished Finder, our landlords don't necessarily have 45 doors like you guys, right? We do have some landlords who have multiple properties, but we have a lot of landlords that just have a handful, or they maybe have one or two. But it's still important that you manage efficiently and you manage effectively, because you don't want to just be running around handling things that come up last minute all of the time. So maybe let's speak to like when this became kind of a light bulb for you that like, okay, I need to step up my game a little bit as a self-managing landlord and make these processes and procedures a little bit more official and efficient, because even if you do have one or two properties, it's still really, really important that you make these things work for you so that the property is not running your life.
This is such a great question, and Grace and I always refer to this as running a business instead of just owning rental properties. A lot of times we think as rental property owners, we're just kind of flying by the seat of our pants. We're coming up with answers to questions as they come up. We're reinventing the wheel every single time we have to do the same task over again instead of documenting and writing these systems and processes down. So they're easily repeatable. We don't have to think about it. We can just go through our checklist and be done with it. So for me, when the light bulb happened was I had scaled to, I think, around 26 doors at this point, and I was completely overwhelmed. I was, like I said, flying by the seat of my pants. I had scaled so quickly that I wasn't focused on documenting my processes, doing everything the same each time. I was just all over the place. I was just scale, scale, scale. And so I had to stop buying for an entire year, which with the trajectory that I was on, that was pretty much a hard stop for me. I mean, I didn't buy anything for 12 months and I completely just worked on overhauling my business during that time. And I think a huge part of this was no one ever talks about being a business owner when you own rental properties. And that's what our book is all about. It doesn't just go into how to self manage, how to sign leases, how to do all that stuff. It goes into how do you set yourself up for success? How do you get organized? How do you document your processes? And I mean, this is just a shameless plug, but I think the book is like $15. And I'm going to tell you what, it's going to be the best $15 you ever spend in your life because it's such a quick and easy read and you can highlight. And I guarantee you're going to get your value out of this book if you purchase it.
Yeah, so Amelia and Grace co-wrote this book for Bigger Pockets, which is like such a huge honor and just goes to show how much like they have really professionalized themselves, and they really have grown from these like grassroots investors, like young females from the Midwest, which just like speaks to my heart. And I love it so much as a little Midwest girl myself. But they're like, you guys are so great. And I think so many people have so much respect for you, as they should. So kudos on that book. And you guys, if you haven't checked it out, check it out. Of course, you can get it where you buy books. But like this, it's huge, because it doesn't matter if you have one property or if you have 45. These things can get as simple and simple or complicated as you want. I shouldn't say complicated, complex really, but it's like you have a business even if you're renting out one room in your house. Now, that doesn't have to mean where you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't want a business, I just wanted to rent a room for a little bit of extra income. It just means that you need to take things seriously, and you want to put some of these procedures and official things in place so that, like Amelia said, it's not running your life, and that you have kind of that foresight into it.
Yeah. And before we get too far, all of you podcasters that maybe prefer audio, they have it in audio version as well. So get the Self-Managing Landlord in audio version, which is of course how I listened to it. It was a great read, definitely worth purchasing, as Amelia was saying. So before we get into the heart of pros and cons of self-managing, let's do a pulse check on midterm rentals and Furnished Finder. So, Amelia, how many midterm rentals do you have in that portfolio? What do your numbers look like? What's your occupancy rate? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I currently have 8 full-time midterm rentals, and then I have 2 short-term rentals that transition into midterm rentals in the off season. Here in Iowa, it's very seasonal in lake towns to be heavily geared towards summer traffic as opposed to winter. So 10 total, but 2 of them are flexible. My occupancy rate stays very close to 100%. For my midterm rental specifically, although I have noticed a slowdown. It's winter here in Iowa, so we have to try a little bit harder to get those leads coming in. But it's still a great market for midterm rentals. I still love my midterm rentals. My cash flow from my midterm rentals, just to give you a little heads up on that, I make around $500 more per month per unit by running midterm versus long term. However, I still have over 30 long term rentals that I love self managing. And I think everything in the book that's talked about can really be applied to midterm and long term. And I won't talk about the book too much more, but while I'm thinking about it, I think it's applicable to everyone. Short term rental owners, maybe a little bit, but definitely midterm and long term. You can take a lot of stuff out of this book and implement it in your business.
And how about Furnished Finder? What percentage of your bookings would you say come from Furnished Finder? Do you only need Furnished Finder and Airbnb? What does that part of midterm rentals look like?
Yes, this is a great point. I haven't calculated the numbers recently, but I just off the top of my head, these aren't exact figures, but I would say between 70 and 80% of all of our bookings, maybe even 80 to 90% come from Furnished Finder. So we're really heavily geared towards traveling nurses in my market specifically because my units are smaller, meant for usually just 1 or 2 people, and they're within 1 mile of a hospital. So we're really, really targeting traveling nurses, which usually are hanging out on Furnished Finder. So I absolutely love and use the platform on a daily basis. And then I would say, I do have it listed on Airbnb. I do have all my units cross listed because I want leads coming in from wherever is possible, right? So about 10% maybe come from there. And then I also cross list on free Facebook groups, which I actually know there's a Furnished Finder Facebook group that I post all of my units in. And I've probably gotten a handful of leads from there as well. So if you think that, just posting on one platform or the other is good enough, it's usually not, especially if you live in a seasonal market. You're going to have to get a little bit scrappy and post as many places as you can.
Today's episode is proudly sponsored by Furnished Finder, the ultimate platform for hassle-free midterm rentals. Whether you're a seasoned landlord or just getting started, Furnished Finder has everything you need to find your next tenant. With Furnished Finder, you can say goodbye to booking fees, markups, and commissions, and hello to direct bookings. If you're ready to experience all the benefits renting your property for 30 days or more, head over to furnishedfinder.com where you can list your property for one low annual price. We make it easy to get started.
And guys, that's like Furnished Finder doesn't have to be your only place, right? We are just like posted everywhere and anywhere you want to, but we will bring you, like, we're going to be an important part of your puzzle. And you're going to make your ROI back like so fast from the flat fee. And literally one booking, especially because when you get that booking, like we're not taking a commission, we're not taking a booking fee. So that's just like a side note, but we're never going to be here and be like, we're the only place that you should list and you should never list anywhere else. We get it, right? Like put your property everywhere you want, but just know that like you're gonna, if you have the quality listing and then like you're following the procedures and everything, Furnished Finder should work out great for you. So all right, I want to dive into the meat as much as I could sit here and chit chat with you all day, Amelia, because I feel like you and I, like, and Kelly, like we just have so many of the same fundamentals and we could just keep going on and on. Let's get to the meat, talk about some of the perks of self-managing. So self-managing, we're talking about when you are managing your own properties. It's really, really common in midterm rentals. I would say it's very uncommon in midterm rentals that you outsource your management to like, you know, a property manager or a realtor. It totally can be done. It's just not as traditional. So let's talk about some of these perks. The first perk is what you alluded to, where there's more cash in your pocket. So how has managing your own properties helped your cash flow?
Yeah, such a great question. Great point, especially as it pertains to midterm rentals. Because let me give you an example. Let's say the average rent is $1,000 a month. A property manager for a long term rental, a property manager is going to usually charge you around 10% on average. And that's just right off the top. That comes out every single month, whether or not they have to respond to anything or do anything else. Then on top of that, they're also charging other fees. A lot of them will charge a tenant placement fee or they'll charge lease renewal fees. There's lots of different fees that you might not necessarily be aware of, but you're getting charged for. And then turn that into a midterm rental. To hire a midterm rental property manager, which, like you said, is very uncommon, they're charging between 15 and 20%, maybe even 25% these days. So when you think about that, that's a huge chunk of your monthly cash flow that's just right off the top going to a property manager. And like I said, that's whether or not they get any service calls. So if you think you have even maybe just an extra hour a week that you could spend towards self-managing, I guarantee that's going to be a great ROI for you in your portfolio.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, I don't know about you guys, but unless something like totally out of the blue happens, I would say we spend about an hour a month managing each unit we have, right? So obviously that's going to scale as you increase, but like when we had one or two units, we would like forget they existed because these tenants come in and they live there, they take care of things, they don't expect the same like Airbnb type management where like the host is literally waiting on their phone to reply. It's really, really manageable. So to give that up and outsource it, like you're just losing a huge chunk of your cash flow.
Yeah. And Amelia, in the book, you emphasize there's not only monetary differences between self managing and hiring a property manager, but there's also some non monetary impacts of someone else managing your property. You want to share those a little bit?
Yeah, so actually at BPCon, Grace and I did a session on all about self-managing landlords. And the first question that we asked, polled the audience on, was how many of you are currently using a property management company or have used one in the past? You know, the hands go up. And the next question we asked was, how many of you love your property management company? And every single hand went down. So I just think that goes to show that property, and this is not a hate on property management companies, there's a lot of good ones out there, but with the right systems and processes, you can absolutely self manage and do everything yourself. I will say another non monetary benefit is just the quality control. Property management companies, they're incentivized to get people in quickly because again they're making that placement fee. They only get paid if someone's in the unit. They want to get that 10% every single month. So people that might not necessarily meet your standards could possibly be getting placed in the property. And if you think about it, these companies are managing hundreds of properties. So little old you with two or three properties is very, very small fish in their very big pool. So you're probably not going to get the attention that you want or you deserve. And when you're managing your own property, I mean, at least for me, my properties are the biggest assets that I own in my entire life. I mean, I really want to take good quality care of them and make sure everything's functioning correctly, maintenance requests are getting filled in a timely manner. And so I just like that extra aspect of control that I have over my properties to make sure they're staying in great shape and there are great tenants being placed every single month.
And if you're listening right now and you're thinking, yeah, no, self-managing is not for me, well, reminder, we have lots of playlists in our Landlord Diaries channel on YouTube, and one of those is co-hosts, property managers. So while there are still great property managers and co-hosts out there, and we've built some midterm rental a portfolio of midterm rental operators that can coincide with you and make that possible. So go check out that playlist on YouTube if you're interested. Pros and cons of self managing. Um, Building valuable management skills for future partnerships. I love that part in the book. Why don't you emphasize how valuable that can be, which I think you already shared a little bit in your own story?
Yeah, that is going back to what I talked about at the beginning of the episode is just what a marketable skill being a self-managing landlord is, especially if you're scrappy and you're willing to be the boots on the ground and really willing to work hard to make money when you run out of your own, is specifically what I'm thinking about. But I would not have been able to scale. I'm specifically thinking of about 26 doors that I was able to scale because I was a self-managing landlord and people saw the value in that. And I think a lot of times you don't realize, like I was saying, what a skill that is. So don't cut yourself short. This is a huge, huge benefit, especially if you can be a great self-managing landlord with systems and processes, documented procedures, and be an organized self-managing landlord.
I will say that the other thing that you're what I'm hearing is like, okay, we figure out our systems, figure out our processes, we make all of these things like really, really airtight. For me, also, what I think about is when the day comes where I want to have a virtual assistant or an intern or my 12-year-old like step in and help me. It's not that I'm going to be completely hands off. It's just going to be more that like I'm delegating and I have more of a team member that can help with that. But I've set up all of the controls. Like I've set up the control board and they're just flipping the switches. And that feels like a really practical way that I can keep control of how I want my business and my rentals to be run without just saying, okay, other property manager, whatever, like just figure it out and do what you want. This way, like I still get to know that things are being done the way that I want them to be done.
Yeah, I think that's also a common myth about being a self manager or owning rental properties is even if you have a property management company, you're still going to have to manage them. Like you're always going to have a hand in the management of owning properties. So why not just do it yourself with how you want it done? And then you can eventually delegate to a VA or someone within your team that you have more control over.
Yeah, one of the things that I really love about midterm rentals, and especially with furnished finders, that you get to have that control all the way through, right? You get to do the tenant screenings, you get to have a damage waiver if you want, you get to make your own lease. And part of that is making sure that like you're fully involved in the process. And if you're not, you're at least documenting how you want it to be done when you get help.
Yeah. That's a perfect segue, Katie, because now we'll jump into some of those midterm rental processes that are part of the pros and cons. And one of the pros is you can attract quality tenants and set yourself up for renewals by personally handling the placements. So, in the second part of this interview, we talk with Grace, who is Amelia's co-founder of Wire and co-author in the Self-Managing Landlord book. And we jump in with her talking about midterm rental leases, some of those addendums, what do fees look like for midterm rentals, guest communication, house rules, and then standard operating procedures to really set you up for success. So don't miss part 2 of this interview. But the ability to be able to place tenants that you trust, that's one of the best things about midterm rentals is your tenant pool is the best tenant pool available in real estate in like many of our if you talk to midterm rental hosts, that's most of our opinions. You rarely ever hear of evictions, but you still want to set yourself up for success. So what does your process look like, Amelia, when you're going through that tenant screening process, looking at the credit scores and analyzing them, and then applying those fair housing rules?
Yeah, such a good question. We do talk all about that in the book, but for me, it's not as cut and dry with midterm rentals as long-term rentals because for me, midterm rental guests are moving a lot more frequently. They don't necessarily want to get charged $40 every time they have to move. So for my processes, I'm usually paying for the background check. I just find that I'm trying to add a little bit of value there and go above and beyond what other midterm rental hosts might do. So I'm paying for the background check for my guests to apply. And that's after I've already had conversations with them. They've seen the property, they've answered any questions that they might have. And by seeing the property, I mean through photos and video. They're generally not doing in person walkthroughs, although I'm not opposed to that if someone's not staying there and it's not going to be a huge inconvenience. But when I pay for that background check, it's checking that their credit score is at least 620 or above. All of my midterm rentals are in multifamily properties, so I very much have to guarantee that neighbors are going to be good, friendly neighbors to the other people within the building. So that's huge for me. And then I typically also ask to see their contract because, again, I'm servicing mostly traveling nurses. I get a few construction workers and some other people here and there, but that's typically who I'm servicing. So once all of that's complete, I have them sign the lease through Tenant Cloud is the software that I use, although you could use what Furnished Finder provides and collect the deposit and go from there. But my screening process isn't overcomplicated. I'm typically going off of how do they interact with me during the initial period of asking questions and inquiring about the property, and then how does their credit check and their background come back.
Hey landlords, are you ready to level up your rental game and simplify your midterm rental business? Well, get ready to meet your new best friend, KeyCheck. KeyCheck is your all-in-one solution for stress-free property management. With tenant-paid screenings, online rent payment processing, custom lease creation, and a suite of incredible landlord tools, you'll wonder how you ever lived without it. No more chasing down checks or sifting through piles of applications. KeyCheck helps you organize and manage all things landlording in a simple and efficient way. Make landlord life a breeze with KeyCheck, the game changer for modern property owners. Visit keycheck.com to unlock the power of stress-free property management and take your rental business to new heights.
One thing I wanted to make sure to emphasize that I love what Amelia said there is as a midterm rental host, you can choose whether you want to pay for the tenant screening or have the guest pay for the tenant screening. And when you're using the Furnish Finder's suite of midterm rental booking tools through KeyCheck, it's an easy toggle. You just decide I want the guest to pay it, or you toggle it and you choose to pay for it yourself. I look at it as that's their buy-in for me. So I have the guest pay it because to me, that's them saying, yes, I definitely want to move forward with your property. And in my case, I've had people follow through every time they went ahead and paid for that tenant screening. I hadn't had anyone that backed out after paying for tenant screening. So that's kind of my check to make sure that they're really serious. And I send all my midterm rental booking steps at that same time. And then on your Furnished Finder listing, there's an additional fees section, and you can go ahead and add the tenant screening there if you wanted to. You can add your deposit, or you could even add our worry-free waiver right there in the fees section as well, to show that you're a competitive landlord and able to have no deposit on your properties.
Actually, I never thought about like having the tenant pay because that means that they're interested. I've never had anyone really abuse it on my side of things, but I could totally see how that could become a thing. It's usually when they're very serious and I'm like, okay, there's one more step. I'm going to run this. And I let them know I'm looking for a minimum of 620. So if you're not going to hit that, like, let me know now. But I was going to add, I talk to a lot of newer investors a lot of times who ask me, do you pay for background checks, or what's your process on that? And a lot of times they're like, well, it's 30 or $40. It's maybe a lot of money. And I'm like, if it's going to make you sleep better at night, if it's going to make you feel good, what is 30 or 40 extra dollars for that peace of mind? Like, to me, I'm just thinking, if 30 or $40 is going to break the bank for you, like, one call to the plumber is likely going to blow up your whole portfolio, right? So like, I just think about it in that way, that like, if that's what's going to help you feel good, it's worth it to just pay it.
I think it's really important to know too that with midterm rentals, you're getting a lot of professionals, right? Like Amelia's targeting traveling nurses. Traveling nurses are fantastic, and they are vetted by their staffing agencies, they're vetted by the hospitals. However, they are looking for different things, okay? They're not going to care as much about a credit score or an eviction history as us as landlords are. Right. So a lot of these professionals will say, hey, I'm already thoroughly vetted by my staffer or my contractor, and I'm always like, that is completely fine, I totally understand, but like, this is a part of my rental process because I'm looking for things specific for tenants, right? And that for me is an eviction history, which I love that KeyCheck and the Furnished Finder tenant screening allows you to have. I'm sure other ones do as well. It's just the one that I find the most convenient in the Furnished Finder process. But it's just important that you make sure that, like Amelia said, you are comfortable with the processes and the expectations that you set, right? Because it's when you get in these zones where you're like, oh, I don't really like this, but maybe I should do it anyway. That's when it's like, set your rules, set your standards and your minimum scores or your minimum qualifications, and stick to them, right? There's nothing wrong with that. And I actually like that you guys handle the tenant screening payment differently. I like to have the tenants pay as way. I always explain it as, this is like an application fee if you were to go to an apartment complex, but I don't see any harm in doing it either way. And I think it just shows that you can run your business however it works for you. You just want to be consistent and like kind of figure out what works for you, right? How are you going to do these things?
Last two of the tenant screening portion that I think a lot of people don't think about till they get there is, what if they don't have a US Social Security number? What are those additional checks that you do? Have you come across that, Amelia, or not yet in your journey?
Yes, I have, not for my midterm rentals.
And how did you vet them?
Yeah, really at that point, so these are for long-term rentals, so the screening process is slightly different. I am verifying their employment. So I'm calling their employer. I'm not calling the number that they gave me for their employer. I'm Googling their employer and then calling that number directly. So verifying that they are employed, that they have a good outlook to continue being employed. And then sometimes they'll tell you like if they're within a certain pay range, and sometimes they won't. So just depends on that. And then also landlord references. So I'm trying to call at least two of their past landlords, their current landlord and their landlord before their current landlord, because their current landlord could be incentivized to get them out of their property. So they may tell you anything you want to hear, right? So always check with the previous landlord before their current landlord as well, and just verifying that they were a good tenant, paid rent on time, and left the unit in good condition. So for me, those are the extra steps that I took. there might be a way more advanced option out there, but the towns that I'm investing in, it's very uncommon. So I don't spend a lot of time worrying about things that aren't very likely to happen.
hmm Yeah, and in the probably 50 or so stays that I've had over, and hey, new feature or one that I discovered recently on Furnished Finder. If you want to see how long you've been a host on Furnished Finder, we have your tenure now posted on your landlord profile at the bottom of your listing. So I've been saying on this show that I've been hosting for about 2 to 3 years, but my Furnished Finder account told me I've actually been hosting 4 years and 3 months. So that was exciting to see. And with that, all the stays that we've had, yeah, we've only had, I think once we had a guest from Canada that didn't have the US Social Security, and they were great guests. And I think the KeyCheck customer service team actually has some of those tips. So last part of this section, and we'll keep it short so that we can hit a couple of the cons of self-managing, is if you have someone say, I have an emotional support animal and you're not currently pet friendly, how should you go about handling, emotional support animals or service animals? Because y'all cover that in your book.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is to refer back to your state laws. I actually know Iowa just changed theirs on what actually can is considered an emotional support animal and how they can get them certified. But for me, I typically just try to, like I said, I just follow the laws in Iowa. It's not worth it for me to get into legal trouble over denying an emotional support animal or a service animal. So I just abide by what the law says. I would recommend that if you're ever on the fence, you reach out to an attorney within your state. I really think that's worth the $250 you're going to have to pay for a 30-minute or hour-long phone call, to just verify what you're telling tenants or what you're hearing online is accurate.
I like your underlying message of kind of like, I'm not going to lose a tenant over a pet. I'm not going to do that, right? I'm going to put protections in place. This is the reason, like I love our new worry-free waiver because it covers for pet damage, which is like everybody's biggest fear about a pet is like, what damage can it do? I do not want to lose a tenant over the fact that they have a cat or the fact that they have, a chocolate lab that they're traveling with or a golden doodle because everybody and their mother has a golden doodle, right? I don't want to lose that tenant. And honestly, a lot of these midterm tenants, they have pets they travel with and they're fantastic tenants. But if I were traveling the country 13 weeks at a time as a travel nurse, you can bet yourself that I would have some sort of companion animal or I would be so incredibly lonely. So a lot of the tenants I've had, like they have people that come and walk their dogs or they go to
Yeah.
doggy daycare. Like they're some of the most responsible pet owners ever. Now, obviously you're going to have your instances here or there where there's damage, but that's what that waiver's for, right? And it like covers you and it's like a little security blanket. But like my first thing I check for, well, one of the first things, if a landlord comes up to me as at an event and they're like, "Hey, I'm not getting booking requests, I'm not getting messages." I'm like, "Oh, well, your deposit's too high, your photos need work, or you need to take pets." Right? Like midterm tenants, there's like 30-40% of them that are traveling with pets. You don't want to instantly eliminate yourself from that part of the pool. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I think we could probably all say that we've had so many successful pet stays. Like I haven't had any damage from pets yet. I think you have, Amelia, and we've talked about that on a previous episode, but it's like it's pretty rare to hear of pet damage in midterm rentals.
I would say I've hosted hundreds of MTR guests at this point, and I've had two instances where there's been what I would consider minor damage. No, none have like tore up the walls or anything. I would just say, if you're going to be pet friendly, maybe you have couch covers and maybe you just consider that you're probably going to have to replace the sheets or maybe some other things in between each tenant. You just keep that in mind. It's a price that comes with getting 30 to 40% more eyes on your property. So it's those are some fees that I'm willing to incur as a MTR owner.
All right. So, as we wrap up this episode, we're going to talk about the cons of self managing. And the great news is there's more pros than cons, but we want to, make sure we're educating you on what some of those things to be ready for in self managing could be. So, managing tenants, we've already covered that well. Like mismanaging tenants can be a con that results in disputes and vacancies and potential legal issues, which they cover very well in the book. But if you're screening your tenants well, you're addressing their concerns, you're ensuring rent is paid, then you can really have a very successful midterm rental stay with that not being a con. It's most of the time a pro. And I think we all have stories of guests that have like enhanced our properties in some way. Like Katie and
Yeah.
I are both like, oh, that's new. Oh, I would have never thought of that. Looks great. Thanks. And they just add it to your home because it's something that they saw there was a need for. That's the cool thing. So if you want to add anything to that, Amelia, please do. But otherwise, I'd like you to address the managing contractors side, which can be challenging. So how have you successfully kept your properties in great shape and worked with contractors well?
Yes. So I think the biggest thing with contractors is having everything written down and having everything in a great scope of work. So anything that's not on that scope of work that they either do or don't do, that's an issue. And I think just being very upfront with them when you first have conversations. I would also highly encourage you, unless you really, really know your contractors, to not pay them in full up front. That's could be a big issue. I would say they either need a small deposit up front and then they get paid once the work is complete. But really, it's setting expectations, following up when they don't hit those expectations, having everything in writing, including any changes that are going to happen from whatever the original scope of work was, and then just confirming that everything is complete prior to paying in full. Those are my biggest tips. And just realizing as a self-managing landlord and as a property owner, things are going to break. Things are going to go wrong. Maintenance requests are going to come in. Take a 5-minute break or take an hour to kind of collect yourself if that kind of thing, works you up or gets you excited, and then just handle the problem like a business owner would handle a problem. So just know it's going to happen, but you can get through it. Every other landlord that's ever existed, that's a good landlord, has done it, and you can definitely do it too.
I think that's going to be my last question for the episode. And Katie, you wrap us up with a fun one, whatever you'd like. What does your tenant process look like when emergency happens? Like, give us an example of something that's come up that was big, and you're like, oh crap, am I going to have to pay for a hotel for this guest? Or how can I solve this right now? Because that would be some of the cons, right? Of how to make quick decisions. What's one of your examples you could give us?
Oh, that's such a good question because at this point, my tenants don't even have my phone number. What they have access to is an emergency hotline that's a VA company. I can't even remember the company name off the top of my head, but that company has instructions for all of my properties in case an emergency comes up. So let's take, for example, a pipe breaks. This could happen in Iowa in the winter. It gets very cold here. So if a pipe breaks, they have instructions on where the water shutoff is. They have instructions on who emergency plumbers in town would be. So my tenant would call into the VA company. The VA company would have all of that information and would be able to help them and service them. But really, I also let my tenants know that, hey, an emergency, the first step is call the police, call the fire department, call whoever. If it's a pipe that breaks or it's something like that, that's a me thing. But anything else, your first step should be to call the appropriate services. I'm very much a landlord, and I think you need to be as a self managing landlord with 45 units. I'm not a hand holder, and I'm a straight shooter, right? Like I'm not here to solve every little problem for you. An emergency is a major major issue that you need to address immediately. Little things, those aren't emergencies. Don't call me. I'm not going to answer for it. So I just want to be very upfront with that. You can set those expectations, but if you don't want to be tied to your phone 24/7, you want to sleep with your phone on do not disturb, highly recommend looking into a VA company that can handle emergency calls. The fee is very, very low per month, and it's totally worth the investment.
Yeah, I think that's great. And you guys, I just think I would remind everybody to adapt everything Amelia is saying to as big or small as you are or as you want to be, but always set up your processes and your property managing bigger than you think you are, right? If you have one room or one unit, you can still take a few days, a few weeks. It's not going to take that long, but we all know how life gets. Like maybe you pick away at it 10 minutes at a time, and you can make these things set up where it's really future you will thank you, right? No matter how big your business is. Amelia, you guys' book is fantastic. It's chock full of so much information, which is my favorite type of book, is one where it's like, okay, this is so much, right? That's the best because there's just so much value in there. So, yeah, this was fantastic and it was so great connecting with you again. And we can't wait to see how you grow your portfolio next.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for being here, everyone. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with a friend. And if you're on YouTube, check every once in a while your subscribe settings because there's ways you can get notifications. So if you want to know every new episode coming in, change that notification to all, and then you can get every new Landlord Diaries episode. So come visit us for all things midterm rentals. Thanks, Amelia. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Bye.